Welcome, women, to the We Can Do It Women movement, where women 60 and wiser step into the spotlight and make the rest of their lives the best of their lives. I'm your host, Debra Morrison, a wealth building expert and champion for extraordinary women just like you. I am helping women continue to secure their financial futures. I'm on a mission to ignite a revolution. Yeah. Showing the world that age 60, 70, and beyond, we're not slowing down. We're just getting started. And today's We Can Do It Women expert interview features American writer, Connecticut resident, and self-described late bloomer, Prill Boyle. Prill, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Happy to be here.
Indeed. Well, it's certainly my pleasure. And I want to introduce you to our viewing audience because you're an impressive woman indeed. And we're going to get into some very, very fine conversation, I feel quite sure. So Prill is an American author, educator, and motivational speaker. She's a self-described late bloomer. Her personal journey reflects the themes she explores in her work. She graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown University at age 38, hence late bloomer, landed her first teaching job in Virginia, high school English at age 40, and published her first book at age 50, for which she is best known, entitled Defying Gravity, a celebration of late blooming women. And it was supposed to have been delivered here today, but I got a delay and it's not. But here is her book, Defying Gravity. And I might add, Jean Ray, New York Times bestselling author, says, a beautifully worked mosaic of true stories. Wow. So welcome to the show, Prill, and I am so excited to have you. So you've spoken internationally after the publication of your book about finding passion and purpose at any age. You delivered an address at the United Nations, for the love of God, hosted the television program Ageless. You've spoken to groups all over the world about finding passion and purpose at any age. And you had your former blog mentioned in the New York Times. Now you're age 70. Are you still age 70?
I am. I'm going to be 71 in May.
Love that. Well, I just turned 69, so we're not too far apart. And you and your husband reside in Southport, Connecticut, where you've recently discovered a passion for painting. We'll get into that in a little while. So talk to us about your book. It is amazing. I've read a lot of reviews of it, and you had interviewed a drove of women, apparently, and then chose 12 women. Tell us about those 12 women, or the bevy of women you interviewed, and how you selected those that you put in the book.
Well, when I selected women, this was in 2000, and you couldn't just go on the internet and, find people. So a lot of this was word of mouth. And, I tried to find women from all walks of life. Some women did amazing things that would sound amazing to anybody. One woman hadn't even graduated from high school at age 40, ended up becoming a Brown University and Ivy League professor at 60. And how did she do that? Well, you read about that in the book. But, that was amazing. Another woman became a medical doctor at 50. She graduated from medical school the same year her daughter graduated from college. And again, a huge journey there. So there were stories like that, might be as intimidating as they are inspiring. So I also included stories about people like Evelyn Gregory, who became a flight attendant at 70.
Oh, tell us about her story, how she got around the system.
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. What Evelyn said to me when I interviewed her is, you've got to see roadblocks as sort of stepping stones to other opportunities. And she said, if you can't climb over an obstacle, try to find a way to walk around it. And that's exactly what she did. What she did is, she wasn't getting hired as a flight attendant. It was a lifelong dream of hers. She had watched, those flight attendants in the 40s with their little hats and their pins on the hats and all of that stuff. And she'd lived near
excuse me, but let's get serious. Flying all over the world for free. Okay.
Yes, flying all over the world for free. Anyway, it had been a lifelong dream of hers. She was a banker, by the way. It's not that she hadn't ever had a job. She was a banker. And so anyway, nobody wanted to hire her at 70. Did I say 70?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
70 when she got the flight attendant. I think she started what, 68?
Something like that. Yes. So we're going to go by your story. So 68, but 70 when she got the job. So she decided to get a job at the Raleigh-Durham Airport, as a ground person, as somebody there that was checking people in, etc. But she made it known from the beginning that what she really wanted was to be a flight attendant. And so as they got to know her and see her and saw her energy, at some point when a new flight attendant class came up for US Air, she got invited to join it. And from there on, she was just such a happy camper being in the air.
Uh, I read that story. I was just so buoyed because it is so motivational, right? It
Nothing.
gives us that inspiration, Prill. Of course, that's exactly why you wrote the book and interviewed all the people that you interviewed. You're recognized for championing the idea that it's never too late to pursue your dreams or reinvent your life, regardless of your age. And in the intro to your book, you write, people who are in jobs that are smaller than their spirit. Talk to us about that little quote and when you wrote it. That was amazing.
Well, I remember I'm going to talk around this a little bit,
Go for it.
but I remember listening to NPR radio. This is also in the introduction, and listening to a woman, and this was probably back in 1999, in 2000. It was 25 years ago. And this woman was being interviewed on her 100th birthday. And the interviewer said to her on NPR, this is where she was being interviewed, do you have any regrets? And she said, well, if I had known I would live to be 100, I would have taken up the violin at 40. I could have been playing for 60 years. And so when I say that a lot of us live lives that are smaller than our spirits, we just don't think big enough. We don't think that we might possibly, live long enough to do such and such. We just stymie ourselves. And if you can imagine that, and it might not happen, but if you can imagine living to 100, then why not take up the piano or the violin at 70, like I am?
Exactly. All right. So talk to us about your painting. What type of painting do? You talk about it self-discovery and really a personal expression of yours. Talk to us about how you started with painting and what you love about it.
Well, I had never painted anything before, and I didn't think of myself as a painter. And I was one of those people that I see in my classes these days, my painting classes that I'm taking, that say, oh, I can't paint. I can't paint. I don't know how to paint. And I just thought, I'm just going to enter this like I'm a kindergartner. And I'm not going to worry about how my paintings look. I'm just going to be a kindergartner and have fun painting. And the more I paint, the better I get. And I've gotten fairly good. So it's been 3 years. I started because I was blocked with my writing and I thought, how can I loosen up?
Okay.
And I thought, maybe I'll just try something different. And anyway, it's been a wonderful, absorbing activity. And the one last thing I'll say about it is that people, when they look at my paintings today, they'll say, oh, you have so much talent. And I say to them, there are certain people like Mozart that seem to be, you know,
Mhm.
prodigies when they're 6 years old. But most people, I think that what we call talent is really love of something added with time. So if you love doing something and you persist at it and you spend time at it, you get better.
Yeah. Yeah. You write very, very eloquently, and you talk about people pinched at their work, right? And they're not really doing what they love. So hence you're loving painting. And so many people, and I do find this as well, they don't even know what they love in so
Right.
many cases. As I'm helping, as I helped boots on the ground 42 years, people, manage, well, I manage their money, but formulate their life dreams and goals, and so often the hope and the dreams have been tamped out of us as kind of this pall of grief of some whatever disbelief. I mean, we did have the Great Recession in 7 and 8, and then we had COVID and so forth. yet there's this need, I think, for some of us to be out there teasing people into their brilliance, right? Into just doing a mind dump. Don't edit, just dump, 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 and figure it out. Because you talk so eloquently about getting people into a space of doing what they love and fulfilling their life's dreams.
Mm. Yes. So, one thing that I do when I teach, and I did it myself, and it's part of what inspired me to write Defying Gravity, is I wrote my obituary.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Now, I didn't, I said to my students, imagine living to be at least 90, because I learned the first semester that I did this assignment that some students would kill themselves off in a fiery crash at 19, so they'd only have to write a short paragraph. So I said, imagine you live to be at least 90. And imagine, and this might relate to you, Debra, I said, don't worry about how much money, whatever you think of or dream of doing, is going to cost. But just ask yourself, who did I want to become and what did I want to do? So, not just when I say, who did you want to become, not just what job did you want to do or what volunteer work or whatever, but what kind of person in your dreams would you like to be? And just write about that. And I gave them particular guidelines. But when I've run workshops, I'll say to students, not students, but I'll say to my workshop attendees, don't stress over this too much. Do a free write where you just write for like 10 minutes about this, imagining that your loved one is writing about you after you've died. And I find it really helpful.
I find it helpful too. I think it's a great idea. And I was curious when you talked about, asking your students to write their obituaries, like, all right, I'm not dying now. All right, fine, just play like you're 90. That was so brilliant. I think that you're probably not going to let these students just like run around you. You're going to be right, giving them the sustenance and the direction to stay with the task. And stretching and growing. You speak of that, and I love it because you stretched and grew to write this book. So tell us what prompted you to write it, because you had a nice epiphany.
Yes, well, a couple of sparks happened, if not simultaneously, really close to each other. One was I had a student in my community college class that was 40 years old that wanted to be an architect. And I thought, bravo, but I hope you don't give up. He's taking English 101. It's going to be a haul.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about him, and I was thinking how I could help him, beyond English skills, how I could help him to not give up on his dreams. Um, so that happened. And then at that same time, I read about a woman, 65 years old, named Winnie Yunker. Oh, I love Winnie. She recently died. I can tell you later on something that she did even after she did this thing I'm going to tell you about, which is that I read about her in the New York Times because she joined the Peace Corps at 65. And when she joined the Peace Corps, the only other person I knew that I was aware of that had joined the Peace Corps that, at that age or later was, Jimmy Carter's mom.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it was not an ordinary thing to do, which is why the Times was writing about her. And I thought, it just was like an epiphany at that moment. As I was reading this, I remember the snow was falling outside my window. I can still remember the day. And I just thought, I'm going to write a book about people like this, people who don't give up on themselves, people who don't give up on their dreams, people that will inspire my student, my wannabe architect.
And you talked and you chronicled women who went back to school, and then you had a number of those people. But you didn't want the book to be all about women who went back and got more degrees or a degree or something. And so you have the doctor over age 50, and then a person apparently opened a bed and breakfast. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Mary Orlando, she went through a very difficult divorce and she was really struggling with money, and all sorts of stuff happened. And she decided that she would open up her house and make it into a bed and breakfast. And it sounds like such a, if you compare it to, the woman that became a medical doctor, maybe it seems smaller, but for her, it was really large. And for her, she just ended up giving so many people joy. She allowed pets in, and she went through this whole process of walking through her fear to go in front of architectural review boards. She had to make this safe. And it was really it was a large dream. You can't compare one person's dream to somebody else's. And yeah, she just did a wonderful job. And she still runs this place, by the way. And yeah, yeah, it just gave her a lot of joy, and by extension gave other people joy.
Absolutely. Well, there's nothing like having, guests in a night, 2 nights a week or something, and they come down for breakfast, especially if they're repeat nights, and you say, you have the same thing. Or I mean, it's just such a warm and welcoming environment, and you really see people for who they are, especially people on vacation. And I actually thought of that for my lake house. And then I had a friend of mine say, Deborah, do you really want to say, hi, here's your muffin this morning? No, I really I want to speak. So talk to us about your speaking, because when you published the book, of course, you were speaking coast to coast. Talk to us about those engagements, because that had to be really exciting to be proudly showing your book and speaking to women audiences of any genders, and giving them the kind of in person. Yeah, you can. This is my pulse. I wrote this book, and you can read it chapter by chapter. That's what I like about it too. You say you can just look at the table of contents and say, oh, that looks appealing, and that's fun for us, especially time crunched women. So talk to us about the speaking tour.
Well, I was really nervous at first. I think that people say, I mean, psychologists say that public speaking is one of the most, biggest fears that people have. And but if you want to sell books and you want to connect with people and you want to get your message out, you have to go beyond yourself. And so one thing I did to help me is I started really in the very beginning of this process. And when I say this process, I mean the process of even reaching out to strangers to see if I could interview them, is I started doing something I called doing a bold thing every day. I
Like that.
tried to do one thing that scared me every day, and I cataloged it to keep myself accountable. And it could be something as little as eating gorgonzola cheese, which, ooh, frightened me. Or it could be, I mean, ultimately, I ended up going to Africa for a month on my own. I got invited by a Peace Corps volunteer, not Winnie Yunker, but somebody else that had read the book. So and then I did a lot of speaking around Botswana, etc. But that was the pinnacle of this thing that started with eating gorgonzola cheese, you know. And yeah, I'm very much somebody that likes to break things into small steps. So whether it's writing and I'm intimidated by how am I going to write a book? I just said to myself, do one thing every day towards writing this book. Could be making a phone call, could be doing some research, could be writing a chapter. I don't think I ever wrote a chapter in a day, but writing a number of pages, but just anything. So keeping the bar low enough really helped me. And with public speaking, it ended up, the more I did it, the better I got. And it was really fun. I didn't know it would be fun. It was really fun to connect with people. It was fun to, to stand on a stage and just feel that energy come through me. I had no idea that I could do that.
Well, this is so key, because you speak of the prescription that you gave yourself like a doctor, and that was every day do something, right? Or make a phone call, think about the book, and yet every day. And then you kept a journal, to your point, cataloging this, because who doesn't get down from time to time? We all do, right? And yet you might have been down for a New York minute, or a Connecticut minute, but you weren't going to be out. Right? Nowhere. Prill's moving through that fear. So first of all, I applaud you completely, because you and your agent went to a couple publishers before anyone accepted it. That seems to be the story with getting your books published. Of course, Chicken Soup for the Soul, they went to, many publishers, and you experienced some of that too. And so this was interesting, because you talked about the responses of some of the bookstores, like where to put it in the bookstore. Women's studies, self-help. Talk to us about how you and your agent got through that conundrum.
Well, my agent was just very persistent. That's what agents are. And I was persistent. So I think persistence is the key. And in terms of where to put it, um, that was that was pretty much out of my hands. So, that was in his hands, really. So I can't speak to that in great depth, but I will say that persistence again is really, really important. And some people said, that looked at the book, oh, we've already got something like this, which is, back in 2000, there wasn't much like this. I mean, More Magazine had just come out. It was, I think that's part of why it resonated so much at first, because the book did, because, the culture was just starting to embrace this idea of later in life possibility as the first boomers started entering, middle age, etc. And yeah, so anyway, I don't think I really answered your question, because I don't think I really know the answer about, how it got on the shelves in a particular way, but it's
Persistence. That's a great answer. I mean, and I wanted to throw it out because other authors in our group, have found a similar conundrum, right? And so it's just you push through, you ask one of your friends or get an agent in order to help you push through and answer those questions. You relayed a story about one bookstore owner apparently wanted to send, she had this conundrum too, but she wanted to send your book, a copy of that, to her mom because she found it so inspiring. And I
Oh,
remember,
that was an agent that didn't, not an agent, that was a publisher that didn't want to take on the book for whatever reason. But she wanted the copy once it got published for her mother. So, I mean, you can't take things personally as well. And when I say things, what I specifically mean is you can't take rejection personally. I mean, you're going to experience in life, whether you're writing a book or whether you're trying to sell a painting. I'm not trying to sell my paintings yet, but let's say I was, or whatever it is, whether you're applying for a job,
yeah.
you don't really know all of the factors that are going into the rejection. And it's really best to think that's their business, not my business. My business is to just keep on applying, keep on trying, keep on pitching, whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
You don't want to lose heart. I think that, that the two things I really had to work on is just keeping my bold muscles and keeping my um, again, not losing heart, just giving myself a little pep talk. I don't know if you've ever read a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way,
No,
but
but I see that in your recommended book list. That was cool.
very famous book, written many, many years ago, still in print, I believe.
Okay.
She suggests doing morning pages. And these morning pages are just 3 pages of writing in the morning. And, writing isn't for everybody, but for me, it really resonated and just helped me to sort of talk through and put on the page any doubts or whatever I had so that I could get through them and come out the other side.
Mm, mm. And you talked about writing stories because stories resonate more than self-help, right? And you talk about, especially the way you've written the book, these 12 different women and their stories, and you invited that we pick up the book and we're going to pick the stories that we're ready to hear at that time. And I just think that's when the student is ready, the story and the teacher appear. So congratulations, you've met so many people in
Mm.
their desire to expand more, I think, right? And to find their next chapter, which, we're all about here at We Can Do It Women for sure. So talk to us about what you as an author, what you learned about yourself as an author in writing this book.
Mm. Well, I mean, so much, so much. So specifically, I learned that I'm a lot more courageous than I thought I was. I learned that I'm more persistent than I knew I could be. I learned that I learned I can write. I didn't feel like I could write when I started, even though I was teaching English,
Yeah.
teaching writing, reading, but I was really focused much more on literature. I mean, I can spell. I'm strong with grammar, but writing a compelling story is really a whole different thing.
It is.
And at first, I wanted the women that I wanted to interview. I wanted them to write their stories and give them to me. But then I quickly realized that a flight attendant doesn't necessarily have time, or somebody that's running a bed and breakfast.
Right.
doesn't necessarily have time or the skills to write. And I thought, if this book is going to happen, I'm going to have to write these stories myself. And I started just by, doing interviews, taping them, transcribing the interviews, and then just playing with it and just reading a lot of other kinds of books like that. And I also, and I think this is really important for our listeners or, viewers to hear, I also didn't set the bar so high that I had to be, Anne Patchett or Shakespeare or, somebody that I think is a really incredible. Oh, that's my clock. It always goes off. I used to do this with my students. I don't know. Did you hear that?
It was very faint. No worries.
Oh, okay, good. It does it every, what is it? It's 32. So on the 30. So anyway, I didn't set the bar so high that I felt intimidated. And this is something I learned about myself, is that I do intimidate easily. And so I need to develop strategies to not be intimidated.
There we go.
And in this case, what I said is, I really just have to write a book that's strong enough that if my community college students pick it up, that they can read it, that it's an easy read. I didn't try to make it an incredibly literary, beautiful read. I wanted it to be an easy read. And I thought, that's something I can do.
You are so right on that easy read. I was dear friends with the woman who wrote 13 books, and she really wrote at like a seventh grade level because she wanted the people to read it and continue with their reading. And that has to be hard to harness your English, book knowledge and experience to that lower denominator, if you will. You talk about yourself, and one of your gifts is that you can see the best in people. And I find just in the reviews that I have read that you certainly did pull out a lot of the best in people. And you say the process basically turned into what was organic for you. And I applaud you. This is something that not everyone has an affinity for. And so for you to look at people at large, writ large, to say, that's impressive. First of all, it has to be received beautifully by whomever you're speaking with. But how has it always been that way? Did you see, the best in pretty much everybody along your life?
I think it, other people have to tell you more who you are than you tell yourself. It is my identity. I feel like I've always been able to see sort of a spark in people and the best in people. And I remember, and this may or may not be related, but I think it is, which is why I'm motivated to tell you. The woman, Mary Orlando, that opened up the bed and breakfast, talked about her story. And she said she didn't realize, all she'd accomplished and who she'd become until she sort of looked at all of the pieces. She felt like her story, her life was like a tapestry, and she was always looking at the knots, the knotted side, and not seeing how it all connected together. Oh, now I know how this, I know what I'm going to say, Debra, about this. And I know why I thought that this was relevant.
Yes.
She said, when I interviewed her and she started to see and tell her life story in some kind of order, she realized that her life was this beautiful tapestry, this life that she thought was a bunch of knots. And so I think that I've always been able in some way to see the tapestry rather than the knots. And I think that's part of why I've now retired, but liked being a teacher, because I think that teachers that see your potential end up being, better teachers. They end up helping you bring out that potential in yourself.
There's absolutely nothing like a teacher in our presence to pull that out, if you will. And I was so impressed as you wrote about that people really make mistakes, but they thought they were detours. But as they told their stories to you, they really wove them into a different perspective. They gained a new perspective on their own lives, and they'd look at themselves with kinder eyes. Wow, what a gift you've given to these women for sure. Congratulations.
I remember when I was pregnant and 20, I want to say I was 20, almost 21 years old. and just, hadn't gone to college, didn't have any skills. And, I just, you know, I wouldn't have realized at that point how my life would end up. At this point, I couldn't see to be 70. I wouldn't have realized, at that point,
Yeah.
all that has happened to me. But as I look back at going to secretarial school. I went to a secretarial school that, Deborah, maybe you remember the name of, because you're in the Northeast. It was called Catherine Gibbs.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Lived. It's no longer in existence.
Yeah. Oh, Catherine Gibbs.
But I needed a skill. I had kids. I needed a skill. And that, it was sort of humiliating in my milieu, my social milieu. I was the first person in my group to have a baby. Everybody else went to college and graduate school and were starting to become lawyers, that first wave of professional women. And here I am, a secretary. But it really, in the big scheme of things, that's where I learned grammar. We had an hour of grammar today at Catherine Gibbs. Typing, that's how I typed all those transcripts. Shorthand, that's how I took notes. All of those skills really ended up helping me in the long run. And who knew? And then I did end up graduating from college.
Yes, of course. Oh, amazing. See, and you're reflecting your own stories and experiences as these women who would look at the knots, and maybe most of us look back on our past and think, oh, that was a waste, or we have a relationship that's short term, that was a waste. Well, time out. How about it's a detour and an actual journey in our lives, and we pick up the good in every instance, and we put that on like a cloak, and we shed the shame, right?
I love that. Shed the shame.
Shed the shame, right?
The shame. That should be our mantra for women, especially. Shed the shame.
I say it a lot, but I say it quickly, and then some people don't hear it, or then the replay, and it turns into something wholly different. But get rid of shed that shame.
Shed that shame.
Love that alliteration. So this is really a life gift, and I think that lends itself to your inviting people. What would it take for people, to make small changes? What are some of the small changes that you might have recommended to this 35-year-old or 40-year-old wannabe architect, the woman who was going to be a doctor, and so forth? I suspect that there were a couple strategies that you had as a first step to kind of take away some of that fear factor.
Well, I think the first step is to take a first step. So
move, right? Move.
Take a baby step. The doctor, her name was Linda Bach. She's retired now, but she was really happy as a doctor in Miami Shores, Florida. But anyway, her husband, when she decided she wanted to be a doctor, she had always wanted to be a doctor. But, she just, even though she graduated at the top of her class, graduating when she did, she was just discouraged. You're taking a man's place, and you're going to have babies. You're not going to practice anyway. That's what she was hearing. And so finally, so she was a math teacher for years. And then finally, she just wanted, it was just burning inside of her that she still wanted to be a doctor. And her husband said, just take a class, take a step, see how it feels. Just take one class. Like, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't feel like today you're going to apply to med school and take your MCATs, take a class, see how it feels. And she said she walked into this, I think it was chemistry. I'm pretty sure it was chemistry classroom. And she saw the periodic table. That's chemistry, right? I'm in English.
Of course, yes, it is. Yes.
She walked into this classroom. She saw the periodic table and she said she cried. I mean, she didn't, just how, she teared up. I'm not saying she just burst into tears in her chemistry class, but she said she just teared up. She felt so much like this was the right place to take chemistry, to take a first step. And like I said, she ended up, becoming a medical doctor and taking over the practice. So this is a money issue. Like, what do you do? She took over the practice of some woman that had practiced for years and was retiring. And, yeah, it was great.
That's impressive for sure. So you talk about people finding ourselves, and women particularly, I think, in my experience, in a state of flux and discontent, right? We fail to see the present. Like as a financial advisor, and I'm no longer advising, but doing coaching. But I was always looking at history for the lessons it would have for us. I was always fast forwarding and aging my clients 20 years. When I met a new client, I would age them in my mind just 20 years because I would imagine we're going to still be in relationship, and we were
Yes.
years later. And it was so meaningful to me. I don't even know if anybody else has ever done that, but it worked for me. But the absence of the human existence seems to be not accepting ourselves where we are and actually being present.
Mm.
You have gone on silent retreats. Talk to us about how that continues to bring you home, if you will.
You have really read a lot about me. I am impressed.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So, yes, I've done these silent retreats, and I don't consider myself sort of a woo woo person. I consider myself feet on the ground, head a little in the clouds, but feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And financially, that underpins everything, by the way. But I started off with a silent retreat. The first one, 7 days, no talking at
The
all.
first one, because sometimes people wean themselves like a 3 day, but you right for the seven. All
At this stage
right,
of my life, I'm not wasting time, honey.
I believe you. And
I'm
I'm right
just
there with
going
you,
in.
sister.
I'm going in, and if it doesn't work, I'll not do it again.
You'll retreat. Yeah.
But anyway, my husband had been to one, and he's a little woo woo, by the way.
Okay.
He's hiking right now in Italy. That has nothing to do with being woo woo, but he's hiking in Italy. So
All right.
he's 73, so he's living the life as well. But anyway, back to the point about the silent retreat. He had been to a silent retreat, and he had written a journal, and I read his journal, and I thought, oh, this sounds really interesting. I'll try it. So I signed up, and don't tell anybody. You're not supposed to talk the whole week. You're not supposed to bring your phone. You're not
Yeah.
supposed, you can bring a journal, but not
Oh,
novels, nothing to read. It's truly silent. But I was working on a book, and I brought that I haven't published yet. So don't ask about that someday. But anyway, I brought my computer, smuggled it in, left my phone in the car. Phones are lethal. So I
yeah.
left that in the car. But I thought to myself, if after I'm going to give it the full thing for 2 days, I'm going to completely do it according to Hoyle, 2 days. And I said, if the last 5 days, if I'm struggling, it's not working, nobody's going to know. I'm going to sit here in my little cell. It was in this old monastery that had been converted into a retreat center, Garrison Center, Garrison, New York.
Oh, yes. I know it well.
There you go. That's where it was. And I thought, nobody's going to know. I'm not going to bother anybody. I won't talk at meals. I won't talk when I go out, but I'm just going to sit here in my room and work on my book. So I gave myself a little escape plan,
Of course.
but I did say I'm going to do it for 2 days. After the second day, it was so peaceful. I did it all 7 days. And I don't know what to tell you. You'd have to ask me something more specific. But I found that calming the chatter in my head, because I think our biggest problem, and I'm just saying this off the top of my head, I don't really know what our biggest problem is, but I think a big problem that we have as humans is the chatter in our head.
Right now.
We tell ourselves we can't do this, or sometimes, maybe you puff yourself up in a way that is not healthy, whatever. There's chatter all the time. And somehow for me, and I can't say it would be true for anybody else, sitting there for 7 days, the chatter stopped.
Mm, mm. Wow. Wow.
Stopped. It was wow. And so what's left when the chatter stops? You have to find out for yourself. I mean, I could hear the birds. I could hear things and see things in ways that I hadn't slowed down to hear and see. And I felt so loose-limbed. I felt so relaxed without that chatter in my head. And the other thing I learned, because the chatter in my head wasn't going when I was driving home, I thought, the chatter in my head is not the same as my brain that says turn right, turn left, over
Exactly.
your shoulder. I was still able to function
Yeah.
and do the things that you need to do, but I didn't have chatter. I didn't have the chatter. I didn't know this was going to go this direction.
No, I love it. I love it. So
Yeah.
tell me, because I have really looked at them and friends have done it and said it's amazing, amazing, life-changing, and I still haven't done it. And I will. It's on my bucket list. So tell me, it feels like once you quiet that chatterbox and whatever you call it, then it's there has to be, well, if imagine there's a sense by which you're in a much better place than maybe all that, all that self-doubt has caused you to believe, because we kind of think we're underachievers or whatever. And also, I think you probably release having to know, like, the seventh and the eighth and the ninth and the 10th next step that you're going to take, right? Because you're pretty much there, right? And so that, to my way of thinking, is the reason. But tell me, what was the first thing you wanted or did say to someone? So at the end of the retreat, last day, whatever, last half day, do you get together then as a group and everybody talks? Talk to us about that, because like I'm sitting here like I'm pins and needles.
Yes, everybody gets together in the cafeteria. It's not a cafeteria, it's a beautiful sort of dining hall. Again, it was a monastery, and you can talk. And I find it, because I've done it now, I think I've done 3 or 4 of them now. I find it a little disconcerting to hear people talk. It's like, I don't know. So a lot of people seem to love it, and I guess that's why it happens. But for me, I kind of like to ease in back into that talking a little bit more slowly than is, the opportunity is.
Yeah, and now that you're saying it, so like 6.5 days of being in this kind of bliss, I mean, for a while, I'm sure there's a little
Agony and ecstasy, like
right, right there. But then you're right, like turn on a fire hose to, to take a sip of water. I don't know. But what was the first thing that you said to your hubs when you either got on the phone or you got back to see him? Just what bubbled up for you is what you wanted to divulge in terms of what you reflected upon.
well, I really frankly don't remember.
Yeah.
But I do feel that the essence of what I said to him is thank you. You
Yeah.
know, thank you. Thank you for inspiring me to do this. I mean, I think that's something we can do for people, is to just, whatever it is that floats your boat, whatever that, like for me with painting these days, I've gotten other people in the senior center that I've been taking classes at. And I can tell you about my teacher, who is also, she's not a late bloomer, but she was an art teacher in New Haven. Her husband was going to Yale Law School. She's right now, she is 79, but she
Oh
only
gosh.
taught that 1 year right after college, taught art. And then she went to Wharton School of Business and became a, business person, et cetera, et cetera. And so later in life, just in the last 3 or 4 years, she started teaching painting. She'd been painting for fun after she stopped working, but then she started teaching painting. And how that happened is people were taking classes, and that with her, she was taking classes, not teaching these classes. And they would be supposedly for beginners, because she was trying to, get her muscles going again for painting. And the teacher wasn't teaching anything. It wasn't really for utter beginners. So she decided to teach painting for the absolute and utter beginner.
Yeah.
And, and so, I keep saying to, as I said in the beginning of this interview, because you asked me about painting, one of the first questions,
Yes.
paint like a first grader, just paint, whatever it is you want to do, just set. I guess another question is, how do you figure out what you want to do? And that's where I said the obit can be part of that, but also
Yes.
just sort of looking back in your past, like Penny did, my
Mhm.
friend, and thinking, oh, I used to love to paint. There's a lot of clues in our lives of what we like to do. And you don't have to think of it as a calling or a purpose. Those are such huge, huge
They
words.
are. Yeah, they
Think of it
are.
as, what would you like to do next? It's easy.
I love that chunking down because it makes it doable. And I always talk about women. It's my penchant to have women experience little wins,
Mm.
and little wins compound. and
Mm,
then they become bigger wins and bigger wins. But we
mm,
got to get some wins,
mm,
especially women that are barren from having wins, particularly in finance, but in life.
mm.
It's a situation where we want to up level our confidence, because with confidence we can do almost anything. Absent confidence, not so much. So I want to get a win. It feels to me like your view of painting about a way to lose yourself and to find yourself, right? That's that losing and finding, right? That I imagine occurs. I've done a little sketching. I'm actually a pretty good drawer. Never done painting, but I've sketched with a pencil. I took a loaf of bread and a bottle of wine up on top of and overlooked the Golden Gate Bridge, and I have a sketch of it. And if I don't mind saying, it's not too bad. So I can see myself doing that, but the accepting ourselves in the present and allowing ourselves to be and to create. This to me is the lifeline for us women, so that we don't gentrify and close down, because boy, there's a lot of life left.
There is.
We hope if we're lucky, right?
And you kind of, you want to assume on one hand that you might not live another day. So you better live this one fully. But you also want to assume, I mean, think about this financially. I've planned out to be 100. And I've
Absolutely.
actually interviewed people that are 105 and still going. Did you know? You probably don't, but you might. The oldest graduate, I wrote this down. Let's see if I can find it quickly. 105. I got it right here. Yes, the oldest person to graduate from college. Now, this is graduate school.
Okay.
She probably already had a bachelor's, but the oldest person to graduate college was Virginia Hislop, who earned a master's degree from the Stanford Graduate School of Education, not shabby, at age 105.
You know, that name rings a bell, and that is so impressive. I'm in awe of that. So just talk to us. You've been at this now over 20 years. How has the culture change impacted late bloomers?
Mm. Well, the culture has changed tremendously over 20 plus years, 25 years. It's changed tremendously. These days, to go back to school, you know, at 40, 50 is not that unusual. You don't have to feel intimidated.
Right.
You'd be surprised how many people do. When I was at Georgetown in my 30s, I was one of two non-traditional age students. Two. These days, I don't know about Georgetown, certain schools, you know, they require that you go full time, and that's not always easy.
Oh no.
But there's so many schools, the vast majority of schools do not require that. And you know, so many people go back to school. I just lost my train of thought. What did you ask me again?
Basically, how the culture changed over the last 25 years in terms of being a late bloomer.
Yes, so much support. Um, you know, again, people going back to school. There's so many books now written. I mean, my book was at the forefront of this movement for women, but there's so many books that are available that are tailored to people that want to make, you know, midlife, later in life transformation. And again, it's no longer, it when people do it, others are like, oh, that's so cool. Wow. So it's not like everybody does it, but it's much more common and there's much more support.
Yes, there is. And with books like yours, and like to your point, a chapter at a time, and what appeals to one woman at a particular point in her life is very valuable. I think it's like seeds. I'm raised on a farm. You know, put in seeds in the ground, and then you fertilize it, and you hope for rain and sun and so forth. And I think some of these stories, a little germinate in our minds, and we say, "Hey, I can go to Hawaii. Yeah, I can hike in Italy. I can do this thing." And we have a number of women over the past year that we've interviewed that have completely regenerated new interests and passions in their 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. And we're so proud of them. So we are on that trail for sure. And I'm interested in your giving us just a parting comment, if you will, as to initial steps. You say start small, and then it feels to me like you know, kind of, I don't know, have a mirror or something and say to yourself, maybe it's that prescription pill that you say something every day. Keep at it, right? That persistence is, that seems to be a central theme of yours that has worked very well.
Exactly. And, inertia is the thing that we have to work with. So objects in motion stay in motion, objects at rest stay at rest. So the key is to find some way that works for you, whoever you are, to keep you in motion if you're in motion, or to get you in motion if you're not in motion. And I always say, and I loved your idea of chunking things down. I love that terminology.
Mhm.
But I always say just start small. Don't make it too big. Um, keep your dream big, but keep your steps, in line with your gait.
Oh, I love that. That's so wonderful. To keep your steps in line with your gait. That's amazing. Hey, listen, I got to ask you, are you still in this group of three women in which you have a board of directors and you call each other into accountability and keep each other accountable?
Yes, three other women. I'm the fourth. So, yes, it's our Creative Women's Business Group. We've been meeting since 2003. Every week, they're coming to my house on Friday. And yeah, so we've been doing this for years and years and years, and we hold each other accountable. And that's another, there's a tip in there, right? Find a group of supportive women, or whatever. Yeah, very helpful. Really
And
helpful.
they're in person. You're meeting in person. You're not don't even do it, but you could do it on Zoom. But boy, that in person is so rich.
We did it in Zoom during COVID, but yeah,
So,
we
yeah.
do it in person. These are people around here. And it started, and this also relates to taking a small step. My friend Suzanne Sheridan, who's in this group, Susie did my headshots for me, not the one, well, she actually did even the one that's on your website,
Oh,
but
good.
on Facebook. But she said to me when she was doing my headshot, she said, I think you'd be a great person to be in a group, in this group that I want to form, this Creative Women's Business Group. And I said, I really hate groups. I'm an introvert. I know you don't think I'm an introvert. The only way I'm an introvert is I get energy being alone, and then
Yes, yes, yes,
whatever.
yes.
But anyway, she said, I really think you should be in this group. And I said, I hate groups. I don't want to be in a group. But I said, I really like you, Susie. So why don't we do this? You pull together this group of the women that you think would be part of it, and I'll come and I'll see how it feels. And then we've been meeting ever since. As soon as we got together, I thought, I love this group. So, don't second guess yourself would be another hidden tip in there. And again, that's just more evidence of my philosophy of take a step and see how it feels.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that courage, because you know new things are sometimes daunting, and I applaud you for your courage to be a late bloomer, to bloom brightly and widely acclaimed and acknowledged, and to influence. You know, no, you never know how many women you've influenced with your writing, certainly, and your speaking, and certainly your teaching. I congratulate you fully. Prill, tell us how our viewing audience can best reach you.
Oh, well, I think the way to best reach me is just to email me.
Okay.
And my email is just my name, prillboyle@gmail.com. If you email me, I'll email you back. I'm pretty good at that. And by the way, I congratulate you too. You're doing wonderful, wonderful work, Debra.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are, and you know, we can, you guys can, everybody can contact Prill through the group, because that's the idea of us mixing ourselves into a wonderful group. And so, Prill, thank you for joining us on the We Can Do It Women show. Remember, women, I see you, I value you, and your greatest chapter is just beginning. If today's episode sparked something in you, I invite you to join our vibrant We Can Do It Women Facebook community. Invite your friends, share the link. And until next time, I am Debra Morrison, reminding you it's never too late to shine. And pay attention to your money, and it will surely pay you back. Thank you so much.